If you lost your mother to death, or if your mother was emotionally absent or narcissistic, then you have missed the nurturing care of a mother. As we'll explore in this podcast, nurturing words, voices of experience. Being a motherless daughter means being part of a club that no one wants to be in. The good news is while you are unique, you are not alone. What if we told you Motherless Daughters Ministry has 20 years worth of pearls of wisdom to help you on your mother loss journey? It's true, and we are sharing all of these pearls with you through this very podcast, Nurturing Words, Voices of Experience, sponsored lovingly by Motherless Daughters Ministry.
Welcome to episode number 51. I'm your host, Gladys Bell, and do we have a treat for you today? Gina Ellis, ministry blogger and volunteer, interviews a recent participant and now volunteer, Mary Frank. Stay with us as Mary shares a candid view of her loss and her journey to the Motherless Daughters Ministry.
Hello, welcome to today's podcast. I'm Gina Ellis, a volunteer with Motherless Daughters Ministry. Today, we welcome Mary Frank to the podcast. Mary is a 2022 participant of the Journey Retreat. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Gina.
Mary, I'm so glad you're here to talk with us today and share with us your story. Thank you for joining us. Would you go ahead and start by telling our listeners about finding our ministry?
Absolutely. You know, it's a fascinating journey. I had lost my mother 35 years ago on December 16th, and she was 53 years old at the time that she passed away. And in 2021, in early January, I was going to be turning 50 in May that year. And I started just not feeling right. And I actually have a genetic heart condition that we were not able to trace back to either one of my parents. But knowing that my mother had died in her sleep of a cardiac arrest, I was starting to have a lot of fear and panic of, would I make it to 50? And what was it going to be like? I was the last of my 7 siblings to approach 50 and even get to the milestone of 53. And in January, I found myself back at my heart doctor and strapping on a monitor. And a few days after that monitor was on, found myself in the ER. They said I was in VTAC. And again, a lot of panic because all that was going through my head was, oh my gosh, I'm going to follow the same course as my mother, and I can't do this. A few months later, I had a family emergency, again, that just took me down a place mentally, and I just recognized that I was struggling, and I was struggling more so than I had ever been struggling in the 35 years of losing my mom. And in April of 2021, I called my company EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and started seeing a Christian counselor. And I was very open. My coworkers knew that I was seeking help. My dearest of friends knew that I was getting help, and just getting help in managing life and everything that was coming at me. And it was just really compounding and building and building. And if I didn't find a way to take control, it was going to take control of me. Then in that December of 2021, a dear friend of mine gave me a book. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, and she gave me a book from a local resident, and the author's name is Peg Conway, and I have permission to use her name, and she wrote a book called The Art of Reassembly. And I got this book, and I started reading it. It's about a week before Christmas, and it was around the anniversary of my mother's death. And I read this book in probably 2.5 nights. And it was the first time that I read a book that was somebody like me. The author, Peg Conway, had lost her mother at a young age. And here I was, 50 years old, and for the first time, I was connecting to somebody And all the feelings that she was expressing were all these feelings that I had had. And in Peg's book, she had referenced that she had gone to Hope's retreat out in California. I can't remember her last name, but a lot of people know her. She's written the Motherless Daughters book.
Yeah, I believe that is Hope Edelman.
Yes. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's a retreat for people who have lost their mother? I'm like, unbelievable. And so the next day at work, I Googled it and I was like, oh, that's not going to happen. It's across country, financially. And I then was like, I'm just going to Google motherless daughters near me. And all of a sudden I'm finding that there's Motherless Daughters Ministry right in my town in Cincinnati. And I was just like, okay, this is a sign. God, I have a deep faith and I believe in fate. I'm not a regular churchgoer, but God has placed people in my life for very specific reasons. And this book landed in my hands. And the author actually grew up on a street just blocks from where I live. And I'm like, okay, this is just bizarre. But I'm then on Motherless Daughters Ministry website, again, right in my hometown. And I'm like, this is a sign. This is a sign. This is time for me to get help. This is going to go beyond my Christian counselor. And I was clicking through and navigating and finding services and saw that there were support groups. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's support. Like, I can go to a support group just like people can go to support groups for other things. Okay. So this was all in December and there was a support group the first Monday in January of 2022. And I sign up. I'm like, okay, I have no idea what to expect. I actually do. I joined the online support group in the evening from a private office at work. And I get on there. And Gladys and Gloria from the ministry were the hosts that night. And then I was the only one. And I'm like, okay, this is really weird. But they shared their story and we each had a story. And now for the first time, I was hearing for myself voices of women who had a story just like mine. And I was floored. I was absolutely just in shock that I'm coming across people who have a story, who experienced something so similar to me. And I just was like, okay, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And through that hour time together, I felt seen, I felt heard, I felt hugged, even though we were through a computer screen. I felt loved, and these were by complete strangers, but they were women just like me. And they had asked me some questions about what I was looking for. And, I've read so many books. I've read so many different things that you just kept hoping you would get an answer in all the different self-help books. And there was never an answer specific to what I was going through. And they had shared that there was going to be their journey retreat, that it was going to come back in April of 2022. So here I was in January of 2022 having a conversation. They told me a little bit about the journey retreat. It was going to happen right in my hometown, right at a place that I have been at. And I said, sign me up. You want my money now? Take my money, because I knew that for me, I needed to be all in. And the retreat that they were explaining to me was an opportunity that I could step away from my life and I could go for 3+ days and really be focused. And for me, that was going to work because I didn't have to dive in and dive out every month of a support group. I could go and dive in, and I could dive in hard, and I could tackle what I thought I could do was tackle. And so I was touching base about every month. Like, do you have any dates? I kept looking at the calendar. I'm like, come on, let's go, April. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. And I had to wait till about March that then I see the dates. And then I saw the pricing and what it included. I'm like, I'm in. I'm so ready to do this. And I attended the Journey retreat.
Mary, I am so glad that you found us. And it's so interesting. I love the way that you explained about an online support group and how you felt loved and even hugged, even though it was just through the computer. And what a wonderful gift to hear other people share their stories, just like you're gifting us with your story today, that someone may be hearing this for the very first time, just like you were hearing for the very first time, voices of experience and that resonated with you. And that even now their stories may have been very, very similar to yours, but what's so interesting, and I'm sure that you'll probably mention it a little bit when you talk more about your experience, but my experience as well has been, it doesn't matter what type or the exact details around our mother loss experience, that some of the same emotions and experiences and ways that we're processing and dealing with those feelings and situations are so similar. And it's always, it's surprising sometimes when you have not had the opportunity to hear other people's stories. It's just not something we talk about too often. So I'm very grateful and thankful that you're willing to share your story today.
Yeah. And, Gina, it's interesting because I was the youngest of 7 and, compound that with my father had left us when I was 3. So here I was 16 when I lost my mom. I was the one that had found my mom and never really told my siblings that story of my account of that day until last year. Did I find that, I have a story they need to know. And, my mother had a very hard life and, she slept on a couch and every morning I would go take a shower and I was the first one up. There was still 4 of us living at home. And I knew that morning I would look at her every morning when I would go take my shower and I knew exactly how she was sleeping. And when I came out of my shower, I would look at her every morning and she had always moved. And that morning she hadn't moved. And I knew right away, but I just yelled to my siblings, it's time to get up, let them find her. I was 16. I knew. I just went to my room, but that day, the rest of my life changed because I was the only one under the age of 18, I had to move out of my home, of the only home that I knew. I had to move away from my 3 siblings and go live with my oldest sister. And everything changed, and there was 7 of us between the ages of 16 and 27. And we were just all trying to survive. This wasn't supposed to happen. We had already not had a dad. We already, were struggling, and this wasn't supposed to happen. And even though there were 7 of us, none of us talked about what we were going through. None of us, because we were just in survival mode. We couldn't help each other because we didn't know how to help ourselves. And even though we all had a story, there was no conversation. There was no hugging. There was no, no I love yous, and I didn't realize, that I probably went through about 5 years prior to meeting my husband of, I didn't have somebody to hug. I didn't have somebody to tell me that they loved me. And those things that I didn't have that then had affected me even into my adult life and into my parenting life. So to be on that support group and hear somebody who had the same feelings, somebody who lost that nurturing care and the impact that it had on them, I felt normal. I felt normal for the first time. And it was just, oh my gosh, this is God's plan for me. And after COVID and my son finishing college, this was a time that God was gifting to me that I could now focus on me. And I took that gift of time and ran with it hard, and was so excited that I had met these two amazing women, and I just could not wait for April. I could not wait for April.
So, Mary, you mentioned that you had not shared that story of the day of your mom's death with your siblings until just recently, or more recently. What was it that had happened, or what changed? Why was it now, do you think?
Everybody has an account of that morning, and everybody was always telling their story of what happened that day and what they had to go through. And nobody really ever asked me. None of my siblings didn't ask me. I think they were worried about me. But in the part of being with the Christian counselor and being able to have her ask me what happened that day, I realized I had a story. And, sometimes when you're in a large family and the dynamics of family, people are, oh, well, this is what happened, or this is what happened. And nobody ever asked. And I was just like, part of my healing has to be me to be vulnerable and just say, you know what? None of you know what happened that morning to me before you all found. And while I knew what happened, I left them to deal with it. They were the ones that then saw it and turned my mother over and had to call 911 and do those things. I was in my room just crying. I was no part of it. And when I looked at what they had to do, that was hard. That was hard. And I never wanted to discount or discredit what they had to do. But I had to be able to explain that, you know what, I knew. I had my story. And for me, my story matters. And I had to put it out there. I know their story, though I needed them to know my story.
Absolutely. Mary, thank you for sharing that. It is so important. It's one thing when it lives in our head or in our heart, but it's another thing to be able to stand witness for ourselves to others of our own stories. Thank you for sharing that. I'm really excited, though, to hear more about what happened with you when you finally got to April and made it to the retreat.
Oh, goodness. I remember that day. I think it started on a Thursday afternoon, and I had shared with a couple people at work what I was doing. I put myself out there, and I've had some very good friends who have told me, Mary, just keep talking because you're making a difference. And some of the people in our very close friend circle, they're very good listeners, and they just said, just keep talking. You talking the way that you talk and being so open, just keep talking. So I had shared with a couple coworkers that I was doing this, and now all of a sudden that day arrived. And I think like anybody, then you start questioning yourself. What am I doing? This is crazy. Is this, kumbaya? I mean, I don't know. Really, am I supposed to do this? I mean, it was so easy for me to get in my car and turn left to go home instead of turn right to go to the retreat. And I said, you know what? Just go. I was already packed. Just drive. If I don't like it, I can leave because I'm in driving distance. I can leave. Some of the people might be coming in. And I remember pulling up. It was a very familiar place. I had spent time on the campus before where the retreat was, and women were coming out to help me with my bags. And as women, we're strong. We don't need help. Asking for help is a sign of weakness, And I'm like, nope, I got it. And then we, just kind of get settled. And I'm like, I got to go for a walk. and I knew the grounds. I could go for a walk. We're right on a river. And then we go in for our first session, and I think we were assigned tables, and it was a small group. There was, I think, about 20 people total. I think there were about 8 or 10 participants. And I remember feeling like, oh, this is wow, this is small. We're really going to get to, this is going to be interesting. And that entire weekend, everything was orchestrated with such purpose, such intent. This was Mary Ellen, the founder, who has a PhD, who's from corporate executive training, who knew exactly the outcomes that were being looked for, and every experience was connected to an outcome that would provide some sort of healing. And I was like, okay. And, one of the first exercises, you had to go into your room with your group and write your story, and you had to say your story. I can't give too much away about the Journey Retreat because so many people just need to go. But this was 3 days. When I looked at the cost, I looked at it as, I'm going to have 9 meals prepared for me. I'm going to have a bed, a bath. It's such an affordable value. What's the worst that could happen? And the most amazing, the most amazing.
No, the food's really good.
Things happened. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, the sisterhood. I was a member of a sorority, and I have some dear friends from that sorority. But this sisterhood that you share when you are surrounded by so many people who have felt such similar things, it was the most powerful. We were no longer strangers after the first night because we all got it. We all understood each other. And I think so many people that had been at that retreat, similar to me, however they suffered their mother loss, they were able to be together with people who got them, and to be felt and heard and understood and not looked at, not pitied on. Oh my gosh, just unbelievable.
Wow, what a testimony. We're going to take a break to tell you about the retreat, and then we'll hear the rest of Mary's interview. The Journey, Healing the Wounds of Mother Loss One Step at a Time, is a residential retreat focusing on mother loss and its effect on your life, how her absence shapes your identity, influences your style of mothering and relationships, how your grief surfaces through your lifetime, and how you experience living beyond your mother's final years. We're excited to announce the next Journey Retreat is being held at the same location Mary mentioned, April 28th through May the 1st, 2023. This weekend could literally change your life. This is your time to be affirmed, feel loved, and have some time to quiet yourself and reflect. Are you ready? You can find more information and how to register on our website, www.motherlessdaughtersministry.com, or by checking the show notes for this episode. Now, let's go back to hear about Mary's thoughts after the retreat and her final words of wisdom and encouragement.
Well, Mary, like you said, we can't give too much away about the actual retreat because people really do need to go and experience it for themselves.
Yeah.
But is there, other than the emotional support, are there any ahas or takeaways that really changed how you think or walk or act and live your life after the retreat that are specific to you?
Gosh, I think there's so many. I think it's obviously being a faith-based ministry and understanding and accepting what has happened to me. I always knew there was a reason, and knowing that no matter where I am, if there is something that I need, whether I need a laugh, whether I need somebody to just understand the trials of a holiday, whether I need somebody to just remind me of how great that weekend was because there was lots of inside jokes and fun times and sharing and camaraderie, that we are a text, we are a phone call away, and I will never feel that I'm a burden to any of those women. Because that feeling sometimes can still be there towards the friends, but to these women, we are so strongly connected and we understand each other and each person's trial that they go through, because you never get over mother loss. You find tools to help you through the hard times, the good times, the challenging times. You don't ever get over it. It will always be a part of me. It's always going to be a part of you. It's a part of every one of those sisters. And to know that each one of those sisters is right there with me at any way. I was texting one today. I received a group chat from another one who does a lot of scripture and sends just these heartfelt messages and reminds you to pause and reminds you to have gratitude in the things that you do have or the time that you did have, and to have gratitude that we all were given the gift of each other.
That's beautiful. It is truly a gift. And now that you've kind of come out through we always talk about grief itself as a journey, not a destination. You don't all of a sudden arrive and say, okay, done grieving now. I'm wondering if some of the tools that you've learned or are in the process of still recovering or managing through grief, moments of grief. You talked at the beginning about how it affected parenting. It affected your relationships. Do you do things differently or have different ways of being in those relationships or being a parent now that you've gone through the journey retreat?
I am. I'm finding that my son is going to be 26. And when I look back, when my son became the age of 16, he and I are very similar. We're very strong-willed people, but I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to parent a 16-year-old because I had never been parented. I lived with my sister and her husband, but I didn't know how to parent, and I didn't know how to love unconditionally. And so my son, at the time when I went to the retreat, he was 24. And I looked back and I'm like, I was doing things from a perspective of, I would have never done that to my mother if my mother was alive. And I was always critical of his behaviors towards me, or, because I just always thought to myself, I would have never acted like that as a child towards my mother if my mother was alive. And I'm practicing, I'm learning that my son is his own person, and I have to do what I think is best in our new adult relationship. We made it through. Those were challenging years for me. But he's an adult, and I can't continue to have a relationship with him the way that I grew up those adult years, because that wouldn't be fair to him, because his mom is here. I am here to love him, to nurture him, to have a relationship with him. And I do still have to continue to tell myself, stop saying what I would do if I was that child, and just start embracing my child, my adult son, and be the mom that I can be, because I am here, I am present, I am alive, and I want to have a relationship, a growing relationship with him, and not always just thinking back of all the missed opportunities that I didn't have with my mom at that age, and what I missed out on, and what I didn't get to call anybody for help. I didn't get to call anybody when I needed money. I had to figure it out. So I don't have to keep putting those expectations on my son. And I want to be able to really love unconditionally and love without fear that something's going to be taken away, and continue to grow as a person. I feel like since the retreat, my heart has been kind of glued back together. There's always going to be little scars or fractures from the traumas, but I feel like now I have so much to give that I can truly and authentically give of myself, because of how I've been able to put my heart back together, that I can be a true, intentional, authentic person and do it for me and not do it to please others.
Wow, that is really powerful, Mary. So much learning. Sometimes we feel when we hit the age of 50-ish, like that we should be learning and knowing all of these things, but truly we never stop learning as humans, and certainly as women who have lost the support and nurturing of a mother at different ages. It's just something that we deal with, and we have learned these new tools to be able to come back to being whole again, and that our story matters. And I'm so, so grateful that you found Motherless Daughters Ministry, and that you're now volunteering with us, sharing all of that wisdom. Is there anything else that you would like to share about your next steps, or whatever else is next for you?
Yeah, the moment I left that retreat, in my short drive home, because I was literally right around the corner, again, everything happens for a reason. I can remember stopping at a local garden store and getting some things, and I was out working in my garden, and I just kept hearing this word. Succession. What comes next? Succession. What comes next? And I'd had a follow-up phone call with Mary Ellen, who's the executive director and founder, who happened to be one of my small group coordinators. And I knew that I had time and talents and financial means that I could give back to this ministry, because in the amount of time that I had been so impacted, I knew that, okay, my gift can be not just by writing a check. It was easy to understand the value of what truly I had received, but to say, you know what, I can help, it's paying it forward. And as I was learning more about the ministry as a nonprofit organization throughout the retreat, because I ask a lot of questions. I love to ask questions to get answers, to get perspectives. And as I'm getting these, I'm thinking, okay, oh my gosh, this is a nonprofit. I can help. I've got, I'm a 30-year professional in marketing, communications, and writing. I'm like, I can help, and, so yeah, I help on a very regular basis now, doing a lot of content creation and helping with different projects, and meet every 2 weeks and giving of my time to help anybody when they are ready. I love the quote that the teacher arrives when the student is ready. And I don't believe there was any other time in my life prior to 2021 and everything that was going on that I would have really taken that time for me, because as moms, we sacrifice all of our needs for the needs of others. But that time of COVID, that time of some major life transitions, those were signs that it was time for me to get help. And now if I can be a part of helping the next people when they're ready for help, then what greater gift is that? And knowing that for 25 years this was going on, and could I have easily Google searched that anytime within the 25 years of motherless support? Yeah, but it wasn't the right time. So there was a specific calling from God and a specific chain of events. And so I will, give of my time that can best help the ministry through the next course or decade, whatever it may be.
Mary, we are grateful. And I just know that there is someone listening to you and your story today that is also considering this a sign. And I hope that they take the time that they need to care for themselves. And if it's Motherless Daughters Ministry, that they know they can find us and that we're here for them as well. Mary, just thank you again for sharing your story and giving a voice to your story and reaching out to others. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here at Motherless Daughters Ministry. If you need more nurturing words, we encourage you to have a listen to other episodes of this podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe or follow button so you can join us again next time.